Tokunbo Chronicles, a podcast about the journeys we take and the stories we make. In this podcast, I'll be sharing moving stories that are sure to empower, educate, and entertain you. Stories have an incredible way of connecting us to one another, uplifting us, and giving us permission to tell our own story. I will be speaking to entrepreneurs, trailblazers, and dreamers who have incredible and powerful stories to share. From their triumphs and tribulations, we'll be drawing out the details, the how-tos, and the lessons we can take away. Life is what you make it, and only you get to decide how your story is written. I hope by sharing these stories with you, you will live inspired and equipped to live yours out unapologetically. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the chronicles. I am your host and chief storyteller, Tokunbo Koiki, a multi-passionate entrepreneur, founder of the award-winning Tokunbo's Kitchen and London African Food Week. When I'm not cooking up a storm in the kitchen or regaling guests with my own epic stories, you are most likely to find me in the middle of the dance floor, bringing the party to life. Welcome back to episode 6 of the Tokunbo Chronicles podcast. Wow. It still feels so incredible to me every single time I sit down to record that I am recording my own podcast show. Thank you so much for tuning in and following me as I am back on this stage of my journey as a podcast host, sharing not only my own stories, but also the incredible and powerful stories of others. I have truly enjoyed reading your reviews and feedback across the different platforms where you're tuning in, including watching this on YouTube. A year ago, this was just an idea in my head. I didn't even know how I was going to get started, nor could I have envisioned then how this idea would grow to become what it is now. During this period, I was actually working on my London African Food Week project and attended a networking event that led me to connect with my now friend, Lysimba Pink, co-host of the Juice and the Sauce podcast. I actually want to take this minute to give a shout out to Lysimba because he has been so instrumental in helping me not only to get started, but working with me on the technical aspects that enabled me to launch this podcast within a short space of time. So thank you, Lysimba, truly. I also felt it was necessary to share that with you because on this episode, I am discussing the power of networking, as well as giving you some tips and strategies that I have used to network effectively. In fact, just recently, I was referred to as a networking guru and queen of networking by two different people. Because those within my social network, I've seen the way that I've used networking to build my brand to an award-winning level. Networking has enabled me to initiate and create partnerships with giant brands like Uber, Facebook, and Google. Make sure you stay tuned in because I share the stories of how I ended up taking space with not only these brands, but also a historical institution that is the British Library. Although we are still in the middle of the global COVID-19 pandemic, I have continued to use this period to grow and expand my network, especially as I am in the middle of pursuing yet another professional career pivot. Ultimately, I want everyone to know that good networking is a skill. It isn't intuitive, it takes effort, and done well, it can reap huge dividends both financially and personally. Dr. George Fraser, an author who has written several books on networking, states that there are 3 types of networks to maintain. Your personal network of your close circle of family and friends, an operational network, people that platoon in and out of your life over various stages of your life and help you to achieve certain things, and then your strategic network, people who are smarter than you or ahead of you in what you're seeking to accomplish or where you want to be professionally. I hope you get much value from this episode, and I truly hope you use it as a catalyst to build and grow your own personal, operational, and strategic networks. Networking is not just about connecting people. It's about connecting people with ideas, and people with opportunities. Michelle Jenner. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the chronicles. So on today's episode, I am going to be talking about networking. Why networking? Well, I feel like, actually somebody said to me a couple months ago that she referred to me as the queen of networking. And I guess you could say I am because I really enjoy networking. And one thing I've come to realize, especially here in England, in Britain, in London, is people don't like networking, and people, most specifically, people don't know how to network. And for me, I feel like one of the reasons why I've been successful as an entrepreneur and even in my professional career previously is my ability to network effectively. Recently, a young lady was asking me, how do you know what project to get started on? And how do you know what dream to, when you're somebody who has lots of passions and you have lots of things that you're interested in, how do you know how to get started? And my response to her was, you know what, just get on with it. Like, just, make a decision, tell yourself, this is what I want to do, and then start small. Start with where you are, with what you have, and then just keep going. And one of the ways you can actually figure out what you're trying to do and how where you are and where you're trying to get to next is by networking. Now, the first time I came to actually realize the power of networking was, I guess, when I was living in Washington, D.C. When I was living in Washington, D.C., one of the first few weeks we needed to go to a lot of networking events and we needed to meet, new people, get to know the city, get to know the different organizations and how they can kind of like impact the work that we were doing. So I remember going to a networking event and I met a lady who is now still one of my best friends. And for me, she came over and she was very powerful and she came over and she introduced herself. And I think she'd obviously had seen my profile on the website of the organization that I had gone to DC with. And so when she came over, she introduced herself, and we struck up a conversation. We then made a arrangement. We made a time to meet up for coffee, and that was generally most of my experience in DC. I found that Americans network effectively because they were very, very direct to the point of, when you introduce yourself, they would, kind of ask about what you did and kind of try to gauge if making a connection with you was going to be, I guess, crucial for their own personal careers and their own personal objective. And I kind of say that it's literally a case of they will ask, who are you, what do you do, and how important are you, or how important could you be for me? And if you were, then they would try to follow up with either meeting up for coffee or just, exchanging emails. And if you weren't, then it was a case of, okay, moving on to the next person. And coming back to England, I realized that, I go to a lot of networking events and I connect with people who I literally know that I can offer some kind of assistance or support, or I can connect them to somebody else within my network. And most of the times when I say to somebody, here's my card, send me an email or send me a message, then I get nothing back. I literally do not hear from that person ever again. And I'm just thinking, if you literally send me that email, I was going to either introduce you to new potential business, or I was going to introduce you to somebody who could help you with your vision or what you're trying to create. And I don't know, I just feel like, in the last, 4 years of running my business, I guess networking has been really one of the things that has taken me to the place where my business is as successful as it is and my brand is as well recognized as it is. And the reason for that is, okay, going back to what I said earlier, a lot of times people go to networking events, but they don't know what it is, why they're going to that particular event. They don't know what it is that they're networking for. They just think, okay, networking is like a buzzword. Everyone says it. You should be networking. Your net worth is your network is your net worth. And a lot of people don't really understand the logic behind that. And the reason why I say that is people go to events and then it's a case of, here's my business card and this is what I do, this is who I am, without actually and trying to sell to the other people in the room. And most of the time, if you go to a networking event and everybody's trying to sell, then nobody's trying to buy anybody's service because everybody there is just trying to promote their services. At the beginning stages of my business, Tokunbo's Kitchen, I was networking because I essentially just wanted to get my name out there. I wanted people to know about me. I wanted people to know about the services that I was offering, and I wanted people to know about my brand. So yes, I wanted to get some clients and get some, customers and get people to come to my event. And I guess to some level, even myself, I used to take a little bit personal when, I would invite people to my pop up on my supper club or my events, and then they wouldn't come, or they would just, yeah, never heard back from them. But what I was more focused on was making connections that I believe were organic. I am going to be having a seminar workshop about how to network effectively, and I've titled it how I was able to network my way into Facebook and Google. Now, for me, when I think about some of my accomplishments, I guess I don't see it as too much of a big deal, because I just feel like I made those things happen because I am able to network effectively. But I understand that not a lot of people have that drive in them. And like I said, because not a lot of people understand the fundamental basis of networking and trying to make organic connections. Oftentimes, this is why people fail to get the same level of success, or fail to make connections and influence brands and other people to buy into their vision or buy into what they're selling. Um, for me, networking was how I networked my way into Facebook. So I had gone to a networking event, and one of the ladies that was there, she told me she works at Facebook, and I was literally like, "Oh, I am struggling with using Facebook ads." So I wasn't like, "Oh, let me get your card just because you work at Facebook." It was a case of, I was like, I am not understanding Facebook ads, and I'm not understanding how it's working. And as a business owner, because this was before Facebook introduced Facebook for Business and the digital boost things that they do now. For me at that time, Facebook ad was still relatively new, and I was just struggling. I wasn't really understanding it. So I took her card and I sent her a follow-up email, I think the next day. Okay, so this is the thing about networking. When you meet somebody and you are interested in making a connection with them, please, please, please send a follow-up email as soon as possible, whether it's the next day or 2 days later. Send a follow-up meeting. When you get that person's card, make notes at the back of the card to remind you of the conversations that you had with that person and why you wanted to exchange cards in the first place. So got this Facebook lady's card, and sent her a follow-up email the following day and said to her, it was really lovely to meet you, and remember the conversation we spoke about in terms of me not struggling with Facebook ad, and you told me there was somebody else in your team that you can connect me with. And that's what she did. And then I was like, developing an organic relationship with her. Added her to my mailing list because she indicated that she was interested in food and she was interested in attending some of my events. And that's what happened. She then came to one of my pop-up events a couple months later. And again, we just kind of had a really great time. We connected. We had, similar personalities. So we then developed a relationship that was still professional, but, she invited me over to hers for her birthday party. And that was how, I got to the stage where once I then decided I was trying to host an event. So I do a networking event called Conversations in Tokunbo's Kitchen. The reason I started Conversations in Tokunbo's Kitchen was my first early supper clubs pop-ups that I used to do. I realized that people were doing a lot of informal networking and they were making all these great connections, but I was stuck in the kitchen cooking for everybody. So I wasn't meeting all these incredible people who were attending my events. So I decided I wanted to change that, and I decided I wanted to be a lot more intentional in enabling the space that I was creating to be a formal networking still informal, because the food was a kind of like the focus that brought people together. But essentially, it's about the conversations, and it was about making those connections. So I started Conversations in Tokunbo's Kitchen in March 2017. And what happened was, I then, a couple months later, I went to another networking event, and it was a panel discussion about women in food. And I remember sitting at this event looking at all the panelists, and there was only one black female chef on the panel. And there was about maybe 8 panelists altogether. And I remember thinking to myself, I know so many incredible, female food entrepreneurs, chef, bloggers who could have sat on that panel, and who would have actually been a lot more, what's the word I'm looking for? Who would have given the audience a lot more value in terms of the conversations that was taking place at this particular networking event. So I remember on my drive home thinking about, yes, that's what I'm going to do. I am going to create my next conversations in Tokunbo's Kitchen for International Women's Day in 2018. I decided I wanted to do a Conversations in Tokunbo's Kitchen featuring an all-female panel of, African Caribbean female food entrepreneurs, food bloggers, restaurateurs. And so I started reaching out to my network. I reached out to people who I had a very warm connection with, so people who knew me and I knew them. I reached out to people who I never connected with before, who I just, seeing what they were doing. I really admire what they were doing, and I felt that they, could bring value to the event I was hosting. When I was in the stages of planning this event, I then decided that I myself didn't want to moderate the discussion because I also wanted to be involved as a panelist. So I again started going through my network, thinking about who could I approach to host, to be the host for my event. And I reached out to the lady at Facebook. And I never forget because she came back to me pretty much immediately and she was like, oh my God, this is fantastic. I love this idea and I definitely want to be involved. And so we were talking about dates, and I will never forget this because she was, took out and opened up her calendar and was like, oh, so I'm actually going to be in Washington, D.C. during this period, but I would get a flight and come back to London so that I can be at this event and I can do this for you. And, bearing in mind, this is somebody that I think I had only known for about, at that point, maybe less than a year. And, we'd only had maybe 2 or 3 face-to-face interactions. I was like completely blown away. And I just thought, wow, this is incredible. And again, it goes back to that thing of just not being afraid to ask people. And when you have a vision and when you are doing something that's about, that's benefiting other people, it's not just about personal gain. I think it's so much easier to get other people that buy into that vision to give up their time, to change their flight and change their plans to like get on the flight just to come to do that thing for you. So when she said that, I said, yeah, great. And then I started thinking, well, if she's this excited about what I'm trying to do, then maybe, because at the time I was, I had a space that I normally use for my event, which is like a pop-up a cafe that I use as a pop-up kitchen. And that was where I was planning on hosting my event. But then when I thought, well, if this is her reaction to me asking her to, be a part of this event, maybe she can help us, do it at Facebook. And again, and that's what I did. I asked her, I said, do you think we might be able to come to Facebook and actually have this event at Facebook? And that's what happened. We managed to get to Facebook and we had this, amazing conversations in Tokunbo's Kitchen in March 2018. And, so for me, just being in a place where at the time when I met her, like I said, because I wasn't thinking, oh, I want to do an event at Facebook, I didn't approach her that way. And because I didn't approach her that way, it meant that when I did get to the stage where I wanted to ask her this, I guess, bodacious ask, it was easy for her to say yes because I wasn't using her all along just because she worked at Facebook. I was, slowly growing this relationship with her to the point where I was comfortable to ask her for a small favor and then ask her for a bigger favor. And the reason why I am this kind of like, I guess, fearless in asking people for anything, and I always say, I'm unafraid to ask anything of anyone, regardless of who they are, because I truly believe what's the worst thing that can happen? If somebody says no, then you are no worse off to where you were before. So if she said to me, oh, I'm really sorry, Facebook doesn't allow us to do events, then it would be like, okay, that's fine, that's great. I would have been back to where I was before, which was I had a space, I had, my panelists, and I had an event. I already had things in place. But by asking, I was then able to elevate my event from just being normal conversations in Tokunbo's Kitchen to now being a conversations in Tokunbo's Kitchen at Facebook. And that was essentially how I networked my way into Facebook. And, within Facebook, we've now done, even last year, May 2019, we hosted the London African Food Week at Facebook, in partnership with Facebook and Google. And my connection to Facebook was somebody new because I reached out to another person who I know is actively involved in Black at Facebook group, and I reached out to her on LinkedIn. And when I sent her the LinkedIn request, when you send a LinkedIn request, you can also add a note to kind of, especially if it's somebody who might not know you, to just kind of like message them directly to say, okay, this is why I want to connect with you. And that's what I did. I sent her a message with my LinkedIn request to say, hi, this is me. I'm Tokunbo of Tokunbo's Kitchen. But more importantly, I would love to connect with you because I'm looking to host the London African Food Week and wanted to know if that's something Facebook might be interested in getting involved with. And obviously the answer was yes. And months later, we had an amazing wrap party and panel discussion at Facebook for the London African Food Week. So the reason I'm sharing these stories is mainly because I really want people to understand that, you know, networking can be networking can help you create new opportunities for yourself, but most essentially networking can actually help you get to the point that you're trying to get to. And even more so, networking can create opportunities that you didn't even consider was possible. So how did I make the connection that took me and my brand and my vision to Google? So in July 2018, I received an award, the Precious Lifestyle Awards for my brand, Tokunbo's Kitchen. And, that was such an amazing moment for me. It was really, I was having, particularly because I was having a tough time at that point. I was at the point in my business where I was literally like, why am I doing this again? What is this struggle that I've decided to kind of like put myself into, and just having all those doubts and all those questions. So having an award that, people voted for me for was really, validating and really affirming for me. And the best of part of the award was also because the ceremony was held at the Google, one of the Google's office here in London, in central London. And when I received my award, I received it from a manager who works at Google. And afterwards, he came up to me and it was like, I really love your brand story. Here's my card. Give me a call. We actually have a cooking kitchen sink here at Google where we invite chefs to come and do cooking classes. And so for me, I was like, great. Obviously, and again, this was an exciting connection for me because when I went to the award ceremony, I wasn't thinking I was going to an award ceremony in Google to meet somebody at Google to then get into Google. I was just going along because I was going to receive my award and have just an amazing time. So, again, just going to a networking event meant that I'd received an opportunity that I didn't even consider before I attended. I didn't know Google have a cooking class. I didn't know that they invited chefs to come and cook for them. But obviously, it was like great. But I also knew that as well as being invited to Google to do a cooking class, I also wanted to create a space for conversations in Tokunbo's Kitchen to take place in Google. My thinking at that point was, well, we've been to Facebook, so why not Google? And I guess that's the thing about when you start to create these amazing, incredible opportunities, either for yourself personally or professionally, it just makes you more aware of how easy it is to create more. And I guess you just, you no longer feel comfortable with just mediocre because now you're like, yeah, we've been to Facebook, so we can get to Google. So I remember when I emailed him, I was like, yeah, thank you for the offer to come and do the cooking class. But then I also told him about conversations in Tokunbo's Kitchen. And again, one of the other things as well is when you're approaching somebody new and you're approaching a new brand, if you can demonstrate that you've already done what you're proposing to do with them, it just makes that conversation a lot much easier because you're showing social proof. You're showing that, hey, I've been doing conversations in Tokunbo's Kitchen for the last 2 years, and we now did an event at Facebook, and I think it will be really great to partner with Google to again do this. And at the time, it didn't really fit into their own objectives, and that was fine. And also, there was a lot of things going on. There's a lot of internal issues. Getting into Facebook and Google is actually, I equate it to getting into MI6 because the internal stuff that goes into somebody at Google or somebody at Facebook saying yes to Tokumbo's request to come and host conversations in Tokumbo's kitchen is actually a lot. And so, but that was fine. They then invited me to come and do the cooking class in October as part of Black History Month. That was an amazing experience. When I at the end of the class, I remember the chef who's based in Google saying to me that my class was the most attended they've ever had in the history of them having cooking classes in Google. And also the fact that, so many people who signed up actually turned up, that they were even oversubscribed and they had to they couldn't take on any more people. That was a career highlight for me. It was just so incredible. And also just kind of I love Nigerian West African food. So being able to share my love and passion for this cuisine with other people and seeing people, really wanting to take, my recipes home to be able to cook jollof rice for themselves. That was great. And even I had a lady come and she was like, "You changed my life," because she had some dietary needs that meant she couldn't eat a lot of fried products, and one of them she couldn't eat a lot of fried food. And one of the dishes that I cooked in Google is called akara, which is a bean fritter that you fry. And she just could not believe that she could now go home and create this dish, which was just two ingredients, and now be able to eat fried food. So yeah, I literally was like, this is me just out here changing lives and just doing what I do best. So yeah, that was an incredible experience. And again, when I wanted to do the food week, so in January 2019, when I was planning the food week, the London African Food Week, what I did was just reaching out to my network. Okay, I'm going to backtrack a little bit about the London African Food Week and kind of come to the present moment. So yesterday I had a follow-up meeting for a partnership for the London African Food Week with the British Library. And this was again another incredible, amazing opportunity partnership that I could not have imagined a year ago. Definitely could not have imagined. Actually, I could have imagined. I couldn't have imagined it a year ago, but the seeds that allowed me to get to this place started a year ago. And the reason I say that is because when I made the decision to start the London African Food Week, I had limited resources. I had, very, very, I didn't have any money to, create this project. And I knew that I wanted to do it, but I didn't have the money. I didn't have the funds. But I so believed in the vision of what I was trying to create and what I was trying to achieve that I just purchased the domain. I went online and I did my research. I purchased the domain. I, created a social media handles just to say, I know that I'm taking this step and I'm planting this seed. And I know that, if I just water it and I give it, put in the right condition where it can get enough sunlight and it can get enough water, this seed will grow. And at that time I felt like, well, I have this connection. So the resources that I had at the time was my network. So I reached out to people within my network, people who I knew directly as well as people who I didn't know directly, and that's how we got to Facebook and Google. Fast forward a year later, we now have British Library wanting to partner with the London African Food Week, not only for the actual London African Food Week, but also asking us to curate a series of events for the British Library food season. Now, if I didn't start the London African Food Week at the time that I did, with even the limited resources that I had, if I was waiting till I got all these amazing brands in place before saying, okay, now I'm getting started, I would never gotten to this point. I would never have reached this point in my career where, we are, London African Food Week, Tokunbo's Kitchen is, being affiliated with an amazing institution such as the British Library. And again, how did I make this connection? Guess it, guys. Networking. the amazing thing about networking is there's different types of networking events. And when you get to a stage where you know what it is that you're trying to network for, so going back to what I was saying earlier, whether you're, at the early stages of your business or you're trying to pivot within your career. So, maybe right now you work in, you work for a law firm and you actually want to be a dancer. The best way to find out about this new career that you want to get into is to go networking within that industry and find out, people who are already doing what you want to do, or when it is that you already have a brand or you have a business and you just want to make more connections, you just want to open up new opportunities for yourself, then you a lot more, you go to different types of networking events, or your approach when you are at those networking events differs. So for me, 4 years into Tokunbo's Kitchen, and also at the time when I went to British Library for the food season last year, I was going with the intention of promoting the London African Food Week. And at the time, like I said, I literally did not go to British Library thinking I was going to leave having made a connection that would then mean we were going to be doing an event at British Library the following year. I just went along, and so went to this event, and it was a free event. And again, that's the great thing about networking events. You can get free events, you can go to paid events. If you go on Eventbrite, Meetup, there are so many amazing resources online. I mean, Google is such an incredible resource. Just go online, Google networking events, free networking events in your area if you cannot afford to pay for networking events. If you do have the money, especially if the networking event is specific to something that you're trying to achieve, then pay that money, because you just don't know what you're going to get out of that event. So you saying, oh, I'm not going to pay £25 or £100 because I'm not going to this networking event, is you limiting expanding your network, is you limiting creating opportunities that's going to take your business and your brand to the next level. So yeah, going back to British Library food season, it was April last year, April 2019. And it was just a few weeks before we were due to start London African Food Week. And at the time, because I purchased the domain in January and, was very, very fortunate to work with a friend and business associate of mine, Nene, who is the co-founder of Vine Creatives. Nene is an amazing soul. Like, I'm so blessed to have connected with Nene. And funny story about Nene, actually. I'm going to come back to that later. But so I went to this event at British Library and sat down in the room. It was an event about updating Wikipedia with women in food stories. So I was sitting down and we all went around the table and we introduced ourselves. And, everyone said what they were doing and what they were about. And I introduced myself and I said, I'm the founder of London African Food Week. And immediately, pretty much everybody around the table was like, oh my God, that's interesting. What's this about? Obviously, everyone had their laptop. So they opened up the website and they saw that and they were like, wow, when is this? Can we attend? And I was like, absolutely. That's what I'm here for. I'm here to tell you all about this incredible, not just about Tokunbo's Kitchen, but really tell you about the amazing African food experience that's happening in London that so many people outside of the African communities are unaware of. And turned out the lady who I was sitting next to is the curator at British Library. And she was like, this is incredible. This is amazing. How can we support what you're trying to create? I'm going to take a moment here, guys, because honestly, I feel like sometimes, I'm not religious, but I am very spiritual. And I truly believe that when you have a vision and when you're working towards something, the universe will definitely conspire to help you get there. And for people who do have faith, either is in, whatever God that you believe in, it pretty much says in all religious texts that, once you sow that seed, have faith that what you want is going to be given to you, or at least God is going to create something even better than you have imagined for you. And that's what happened. I went to this event at British Library just with the intention of sharing and, trying to get other people outside of my normal community, outside of my normal network, to find out about, the London African Food Week. And I left that room, I left that event, at the end of that event, having made a connection with one of the curator at British Library, one of the top bosses essentially at British Library, who was now interested in supporting my vision and getting an institution such as British Library on board. And I could not have predicted that. I could never have predicted that when I left my house that day, that this event that I'm going to, this is what's going to come out of it. So it just goes back to that thing about when you are in a space where you know what you're networking for, and you have social capital that you can show. So obviously when I went there and I said, yeah, I'm doing the London African Food Week, they were like, oh, opened up the website, they could see. And the reason why we had an amazing website was because of Nene and Vine Creatives. And again, Nene is somebody I connected. In fact, in my network, I literally feel like because I am connected to Nene, my network expanded, expansion. Can never say this word. My network expanded so vastly. Nene is connected to pretty much any and everyone. Like, she is a powerhouse. Please, I'm gonna link her and Vine Creatives into the show notes. So please do follow Nene and follow her brand. She does amazing things within the community, within the African Caribbean community here in the UK and in Africa. And I remember connecting with Nene a couple of years ago on social media, and I came across her brand. And I remember at the time I emailed her because I was interested in getting some flyers done. And I still have the email because the quote that Nene sent me and Vine Creative sent me back then, I was like, I'm at the early stages of my business. I was like, I don't really have this kind of money to be spending on flyers. But because I don't believe in burning bridges, and also because, like, at the time, even though I didn't have, it wasn't in my budget. See, that's the other thing. When you, as a business owner, one of the best lessons that I've learned is I no longer say, something's too expensive, because as somebody who works hard to provide services for other people, it's sometimes annoying when somebody tells you, oh, your price is too expensive. And you're just like, no, it's not. It's just not in your budget, or you don't have the resources to afford me. So that's what I've learned. So at the time when I received the initial quote from Nene about working with me and doing some work for me, for my brand, it just wasn't in my budget. But we stayed connected. She attended one of my pop-up events, brought her kids to a street food store festival that I was doing, Africa Utopia at South Bank. And, her daughter fell in love with my food. And then it became like a ritual where every year, she would bring her daughter and, come to get food from me. And again, we developed a relationship on social media, a friendship. And again, this is the amazing thing about social media in terms of, networking. A lot of people do not understand the power you can have in having social media friends who, again, buy into you, buy into your brand, buy into your business, who they might not have a direct connection to you in terms of being able to attend your event or being able to work with you directly, but they're rooting you on. And so just kind of like maintaining those relationships, because you never know when, at some point later on in life, you might be able to then make that connection with them. So in November 2018, I had bumped into Nene at a fashion event, because again, I have a love of fashion. I don't know if you guys can see, if you've not noticed, but yeah, in the way I show up, fashion is one of my dreams. And so I gone to Stylist Live and bumped into Nene there, and I was talking to Nene about some of my visions. And I remember she saying to me that my current website and my current brand image didn't fully align with who I was, and talking to me about doing a rebrand. And at that point, I myself was already feeling, in fact, I've been, the universe had been sending me so many different messages about that how I show up and what was being represented about me and my brand on social media were not fully aligned. So met with Nene early on in 2019 to talk about doing a rebrand for Tokunbo's Kitchen. But then I also shared with her what I was doing with the London African Food Week. And, I am a avid, I truly believe that when you have something that you're trying to achieve, the best way to know if this is something that you can go ahead with, or if this is something that maybe is not best right now, or you're not the person for this, is to share it with people that you really admire, and people who, you admire, and that they will tell you whether, yes, this is great, or actually this is not really sound. And so for me, Nene is one of those people that anything I want to do, if Nene tells me, Tokunbo, this is incredible, I know I'm onto a winner. And when I told her about the London African Food Week, she immediately offered to partner with me and support the vision. And we decided to work together, and Nene created the logo, the website, so that couple months later, and even through the process of trying to like get these brands on board, and sometimes just having a soundboard, like Nene's like, she's like a mentor, she's part of my board of advisory. She's literally somebody that I can like send her an email and be like, okay, Nene, what do you think of this? And she'll come back to me and tell me no, or she'll tell me yes, or she'll just help me expand my idea or my vision. And that's what she did with the London African Food Week. So getting her to, and at this point, even though I really still didn't have a budget in terms of African Food Week, when we needed to create that logo and we needed to create that website, and at this point, I knew that working with a branding strategist like Vine Creatives was what would take my vision and what I was trying to create to the level that I knew I was operating at. I knew I needed to find that budget. I just knew I needed to like find it somehow. And so that's what we did. And thankfully, at the point when I was then at British Library, and this lady then opened up her laptop and opened up the London African Food website, she was blown away. And so to me, it was a full circle moment, because you know even with a limited resource, just utilizing my network and just, leveraging on the social capital that I had with somebody like Nene to be like, okay, right now I don't have the budget, but if we can find a way to work together, and I can pay you in installments, and she can do some partnership work, so then that it's also a win for her. I was able to leverage on that to create this incredible thing. And then, when I do go to events, I am now able to get, British Library on board. So one of the things that I know stops people going to networking events, especially people who might be a little bit more introverted, is not knowing what to say. And essentially, like I said, I look at networking events as in I'm trying to, I guess, maybe make a new friend or meet a new acquaintance. It's like when you start a new job, you try to find a common ground. So you meet your colleagues and you find out a little bit about them. You tell them a little bit about yourself, and then you try to find where are the common grounds that we have or share that will allow people to be a bit more interested in me. Specifically with networking, one thing that I would definitely advise, and I think helps me a lot, is reading and books. I mean, I love books and books about networking. There are so many different books about networking that people can read. One of my favorite networking books is a book called Monday Morning Motivation by Dave Contrell. And again, coming from an American perspective, one of the things Americans have done really well in terms of networking is perfecting something called the elevator pitch. And the elevator pitch is essentially, imagine you are in an elevator with, you know, Richard Branson, and you've got only 12 seconds to introduce yourself to Richard Branson in a way that is going to make Richard Branson remember you and maybe want to get to know you or maybe do business with you. So an elevator pitch is essentially that. It's you, summarizing what you do in a very succinct way, but in a way that is personable to you, and in a way that also will make people remember you. I guess for me, I know that it's sometimes I feel like it does come a lot more naturally for me because I am an extrovert and I am extroverted. And because of my previous work, because of my previous work experiences and background as a psychologist, I do, I read people very well. So I'm, able to kind of like go into a room, and also just kind of like how you show up. So I've gone to a lot of people don't know this, but in psychology, people make judgments about you within the first 2 seconds of seeing you. So I always tell my mentees and I tell people all the time, how you show up is how people would judge you. And so if you are serious about who you are, and also thinking about who is the person I'm trying to become. So one of the key things about personal development is really thinking about, who are you trying to become? Are you trying to become, if you're a lawyer and you're trying to become if you're currently an associate and you're trying to become a partner, look at the partners in your law firm, look at how they dress, look at how they show up, look at their mannerisms. And, that's how you model to decide who you want to be and how you want to show up. So for me, thinking about, when you're going to networking events, what you're wearing, how comfortable do you feel with how you show up in terms of your style and what you're wearing. A networking event doesn't necessarily mean you have to be corporate. You can literally go to a networking event, depending on which one it is and where it is. You can go in as informal as you want. You can go in casual, formal, but it's really about, thinking about the colors that you're wearing and the language that you use and how you convey yourself through your body language. I also always tell people, at networking events, when you go to a networking event and you see there are people already having conversations and you don't necessarily know how to go up to just anybody and, introduce yourself, just join in that group. Find a group of like 3-4 people and just insert yourself in there and not necessarily saying anything. You will find that within just a few minutes or a few seconds even of you joining that circle, people will notice you and people will like, oh, who are you? What do you do? And that's the best place to start with, when you go to networking event. Is please, I've been to a networking event where somebody literally came over to me and the first thing that they did was, put their card in my face. And I remember just thinking, well, even if your business was something that I was going to be interested in or I needed, or your services was something that I needed or would need in the future, this approach is just so off-putting that I don't even think I kept the card. And so, the best place to start at a networking event is just introducing yourself. And if you can have your elevator pitch ready, if you already, an elevator pitch is something that you can practice, write it out, go online, Google, best elevator pitches, listen, look at other people's examples. So once you already have your elevator pitch, when you introduce yourself, so one of my elevator pitches back in a couple of years ago or last year even was, hi, I'm Tokunbo, and I do the two things that most people cannot live without. Now, if you meet me at a networking event and I introduce myself to you like that, you're gonna be like, what are the two things that I can live without? And then you're going to ask me that question. And then my follow up is, I do food and I do fashion. And then people are like, oh, yes. And then it generates a conversation. So that's how I show up. And that's how I kind of like break the ice and, introduce myself to people. But it can also just be as simple as, hi, I'm Tokunbo and I make people happy by feeding them delicious food. Elevator pitches do not have to be anything like, it doesn't have to be all the way out there. It can really be as personable and as unique to you and yourself and your brand as you want it to be. The key thing is really showing up as yourself and, being comfortable in, this is who I am and this is who I'm trying to become. And so when you go to a networking event, yeah, just start off with an introduction, who you are, elevator pitch, and then, find out about the other person. Because again, there's nothing more. And, we've all had that experience where, you've been a networking event or any event, and the person you're speaking to is just going on and on and on about themselves and talking about all these amazing things that they do and all these fantastic things. And, this is where I was last year and this is what I'm doing now. And, and nothing about you and not even, being curious about what you're doing and what you're interested in. And so again, that can be in itself very off-putting. So it's about give and take. So at networking events, you're essentially trying to make connections. So you're telling them about yourself, but then you're also trying to find out a little bit about them. And it's a conversation. And, I think, we sometimes, especially in England, one thing I've noticed in comparison to my experiences of living and networking in countries like Nigeria and in the US, especially in Washington, D.C., is we British have this sense of humbleness of not wanting to brag about our accomplishments and brag and talk about our achievements. And that limits us. It limits us in terms of, if I don't know who you are, or I don't know what you've been able to do in the past, then how can I trust to buy into you, and how can I trust to buy into your service? One of my favorite books is called Start with Why by Simon Sinek. And it's also a TED Talk with the same title, Start with Why. And what Simon says in this talk, in this TED Talk, and in this book is, people buy into people. And as a psychologist, as somebody who has a psychology background, I truly believe in that. People, I know that I've done events where people have come to my event because they bought into me, not necessarily because they think my food is the best food in London, even though I truly believe I cook the best jollof rice in London and nobody can tell me any difference. But I know, yeah, people have come to my events because they buy into me. They buy into Tokunbo before they buy into Tokunbo's kitchen. I truly believe in the notion of just being authentic to yourself and being focused on showing up in you, like, so showing up as yourself, not showing up as how you perceive people think you should be, but really being comfortable in yourself and in your brand and in your business. And that comes across when you go to networking events. So yeah, so I guess for me, it's basically saying, start with introduction and elevator pitch that is sustained, is memorable. Because another thing about networking events sometimes is you can meet tens and twenties. You can meet lots of people. You can meet, some networking events can be hundreds of people within a day. And you want to be somebody that stands out. You want to be somebody that is memorable. And that's why having an amazing elevator pitch can help with that. Also, having an interesting business card. I find sometimes I've met people who I may not necessarily have connected with, but then when I see their business card, again, a business card can be a way of you showing, expressing yourself and showing a little bit about your personality. So business cards do not have to be the standard rectangle, plain black and white. I have had so many amazing and interesting business cards that tells me a little bit more about the person than actually sometimes having a conversation with that person did. So having a business card makes you stand out. And if you are somebody that's comfortable with having just a plain old business card, that's perfectly fine. Maybe injecting some colors into your business card. So for me, my brand colors are yellow. Is yellow, and I absolutely love yellow. You might have noticed, people who can see my living room right now, my sofa. So again, my business card is yellow because, again, when you go home and you are going through your business cards and everything is white, and then you see that yellow business card, you're going to remember Tokunbo's Kitchen. And that is, the thought process behind my brand colors. And again, why I was, intentional in having a yellow business card. So just those are some of the strategies and ways that you can really set yourself aside from the pack at networking events. So I guess to do a quick recap, some of the strategies that have worked for me when I'm going to networking event is, having an amazing elevator pitch, showing up as myself and being very, very confident in how I show up, but being also very intentional in how I show up. So the type of outfit I would wear to a informal networking event at the British Library is not going to be the same as the outfit that I would wear to a networking event at Goldman Sachs, where I am going to be possibly networking with directors and decision makers. It's common sense should prevail, but I also know that common sense isn't always so common. So I guess it's just a case of being able to understand context and situations. So there are some places where a dress code might not be enforced, but it's an unspoken code. There's an unspoken code that says that if you're going to certain places, you should be dressed a certain way. So just kind of bearing that in mind. So yeah, having your elevator pitch, having showing up in a way that shows you and your brand and your business in the best light. So if you are a personal stylist, if you tell me you're a personal stylist, but then I'm looking at your outfit and your outfit is not giving me like the, oh yeah, this is somebody that I would love to work with, or this is somebody who, oh, interesting style, maybe this is something that I can aspire to, then I'm not gonna buy into your service. Or if you tell, yeah, so it's just kind of like being, showing up in the best, in the light that shows you in the best, showing up in a way that shows you in the best light. Then being, networking events are, just conversations, places to have conversations. So if you go with that approach, and when you meet people, you know introduction, they introduce themselves, and you just have a conversation, and you see if this is somebody that I want to make a connection with, if this is somebody that I want to possibly have in my network. The other thing also about networking is sometimes the connections that you're making today, you might never need to reach out to them for the next 1 year, 2 years. It might just be that you're just part of my circle. You're now in my community. I now have a connection to you. And then in 2 years' time, so you might meet somebody. And I remember meeting a lady at a networking event that told me she was a ghostwriter. At the time, I was like, oh, that's an interesting career, but I don't really need ghostwriter. Now I'm at a stage where I'm personally writing a book. Not saying that I'm going to be using a ghostwriter, but if I did decide to use a ghostwriter, I'm going to remember that lady from 2 years ago, and I might possibly, check her out, see if she's still doing what she's saying she's doing. Because also the other thing about networking is, and also kind of like trying to keep that connection going, is people pivot a lot. So where somebody was when you met them 2, 3, 4, 5 years ago doesn't necessarily mean that's what they're going to be doing now. But social media is a really great way for us to stay connected and kind of see people's progressions and the different pivots that they might be making in their personal and professional careers, lives, and also for their businesses. Because I know that sometimes I've met people and then, their business have changed in, within a year, sometimes within 2 years. So it's really about, networking for me is about curating a curating a community of people who I am interested in seeing what they're doing. I'm interested in learning about them, but I'm also possibly interested in maybe at some point doing business with them. And so it's not always that I meet somebody today and I want that person to come to my event tomorrow. It might just be that I meet you today and I tell you about Tokunbo's Kitchen, or I tell you about the London African Food Week, or I tell you about another project that I'm working on. And then maybe in the future, we might have a chance to work together, do some collaboration together, or actually, you might just be somebody who is in my network and who can just be somebody who is cheering me on, or I'm cheering you on. So for me, when I'm networking now, I'm not necessarily always networking because I'm trying to sell a service or sell my brand. I'm networking because I'm trying to just expand my network. I'm trying to, meet new and interesting people and also be inspired by what other people are doing. Because sometimes when you go to networking events and somebody tells you, oh, I'm doing food and I'm doing fashion and I'm doing this, it gives you the permission to be like, oh, actually, okay, if she's doing all of those things and, she's doing them really well, then maybe I can also do that. Sometimes, I go to, and also I'm now a lot more strategic about the types of networking events that I go to. So when I am trying to grow and start my fashion brand and my fashion business, I am now being more intentional in going to a lot more fashion related networking event, because it's a completely different space to the food space that I've been in the last 4 years. And so I now want to get myself into that space, learn a little bit more about people, and see the different opportunities that might be available to me within that space. Or also just, again, finding out if this is something that I want to do, if personal styling is something that I really want to do. So just this earlier today, I discovered a new podcast. And so when I was going through the show notes, one of the first episode I decided to listen to was an interview that she did with a personal stylist, just because I was like, okay, at some point this year, I myself want to launch my personal styling business. So it makes sense for me to listen to interviews with other personal stylists. It makes sense for me to network and try and meet other stylists and, learn from them and see what they're doing. The other thing about networking is, please, please, please do not be afraid to follow up. So if you meet somebody that you're really interested in and you're really interested in connecting with, you can even just follow them on LinkedIn straight away. You can make that connection straight away. You can, whilst you're at that networking event, you can take out your phone and just connect with them in LinkedIn. If not, if you're still old school and exchanging business cards, you can also just send them an email, as soon as possible, and tell, hi, my name is Amy. I met you at this networking event, and I really enjoyed listening to you telling me about your life as a web developer, and how you're now also following your passion to do music. Bam, love to stay connected. That's it. It's not rocket science, guys. It's as scary as people sometimes make it out to be. Networking doesn't have to be as overwhelming as it can sometimes appear to be. And I'll be, very honest. I've also gone to some networking events where, especially when I've stretched myself to go to networking events that are outside of my comfort zone. So sometimes I would just go to, I would see it like a tech networking event at the City of Mayor partnership with a law firm in the city, and I'll be like, why not? And then I'll go there, and then I'll feel overwhelmed because everybody there are talking about things that I myself don't necessarily know. So sometimes I just go to those networking events and I listen, and then when I am making those connections, I just try to be as relevant to what this event is about. And if there is no way for me to be relevant, then I still just introduce myself and introduce what I do. And I think the great thing about food is something that it's an easy way to connect to people. Food and fashion. So I guess one of the reasons that also helps me in terms of when I'm networking. Another particular thing that I wanted to kind of talk about on this episode is this book by Jenny Blake. It's called Pivot. The Only Move That Matters Is Your Next One by Jenny Blake. And in my book, I have highlighted several sections. If there's a particular section that I really like, I fold it so that when I come back to the book, it's just easy for me to flip it open and stuff. And the reason I really enjoy this book, and I heard about this book on another podcast. And she also has her own podcast called Pivot. And what I love about this is, if you are somebody like me who does have multiple interests and you have lots of things that you're interested in, it gives you actual strategies in how you can, pivot into something new through the power of your network. So yeah, make sure you try and check it out. At the end of each podcast episode, I'm going to try and introduce a favorite book of mine, or a book of mine that I'm reading, and the ways that book has kind of impacted me and given me the tools and strategies that I now use to expand my own business. So my book for this week is Pivot. The Only Move That Matters Is Your Next One. And so go to that networking event and try and remember my tips. If you found them useful, if the tips that I've given and the strategies that I've given have been helpful to you, please drop me a line, send me a message, let me know. Would really love to hear your experiences of networking. Which, do you love it? Do you hate it? What do you enjoy about networking? And what are the ways that networking have been able to kind of propel you to the next level? If you want to send me an email or just drop me a message to find out a little bit more about networking from my perspectives and the ways that I've been kind of being able to use network to build a successful brand, I would definitely love to connect with you. And if you just want to be part of my community and you want to be connected to me, so follow me on social media, the Tokunbo Chronicles, or Tokunbo's Kitchen, or just find me on LinkedIn. And yeah, thank you for listening to this episode of the Tokunbo Chronicles. I hope it has been of value to you, and I look forward to speaking to you next time.